Hey there. I believe we are live.
Cool. I feel alive.
I feel alive. I feel alive. So I'm going to go over to youtube.com/ Max Keiser TV. And again, you may have already seen us on our Facebook page. We're basically just trying out some various software here. So that's why you're seeing us right now, maybe. Max, do you have anything to say?
I see us on that screen.
Right.
So that's cool. And I'm just and very excited by this whole microdose project.
Right. I see us here on this. So YouTube has made it easy. And I think I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to, okay. I see people already chatting with us. Hey, this is a microdose of Orange Pill Podcast. And where Stacy walks you through some of the headlines and what's happening. And just so you know, we're working on getting this stream deck to work because, like, I have other cameras I could use and cut to. Right now, we have the single camera, and I have some videos we can cut to. But we can't do that now because I would have to get up and go to the computer and hit various buttons to skip to the next segment. But we can't do that because we're live and there's only one of me. So I have this stream deck, but it's gonna take me a few weeks to research on how to program it. It's a few hours and therefore a few weeks it'll take to research it and manage that and figure out how to use that. But once I do that, then we'll have like a multicam studio and I just need to press a certain button and we can skip to various headlines. So in the meantime, I want to say, that a big new thing is happening. This week, we saw MicroStrategy announce that they bought another couple, like over 10,000 new Bitcoin. And at the same time, Bitcoin hash rate has passed 150 exahashes to reach an all-time high. That's 150,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000,000 hashes per second. What do you think of that, Max?
Well, on the MicroStrategy news, so a third of their balance sheet is now Bitcoin. So they've become, to some degree, a publicly traded Bitcoin ETF to some degree. Another way to look at that is that it's a leverage play on Bitcoin because it's like you're buying Bitcoin and you get a software company on as an added bonus. It's a blended security at this point, and it competes with nobody. There's nobody really else out there doing something like this that has a growth company attached to a huge Bitcoin position. And will there be other companies announcing conversion of their cash holdings to Bitcoin as a strategic anti-inflationary, precautionary store of value measure? I think the answer is yes. When you get a company like Apple Computer, they've got their annual call right now with new products, et cetera. Somebody like that with hundreds of billions of dollars of cash in their balance sheet, if they were to start allocating some of that to Bitcoin, that would make some big waves. But the conquest of Bitcoin on the world is well underway. As far as the hash rate hitting 150 quintillion hashes per second, this is the one metric of Bitcoin that never goes down in any appreciable way, and that would be hash rate. I always say, don't look at price, look at hash rate. Hash rate is to Bitcoin what ounces are to gold, right? Gold is priced in ounces, and Bitcoin is priced in hash rate, not in any other metric, really. If you want to understand more deeply how Bitcoin permeates and transforms.
So how's the audio? Everybody's saying the video quality is great and they can actually read the titles of the books on the bookshelf behind us. Can you read this sign from Max from when he was at Hollywood Stock Exchange? It's called Ratings Riser. That was Max Keiser, Ratings Riser. Get it? It kind of rhymes.
Yeah, that's right. Pretty much anything I touch, ratings go higher. Max Keiser, the ratings riser, whatever he touches, ratings go higher.
Well, this camera is 4K. Yikes, it's live. Anything on link, you sound great. Video and audio, great. Great. Audio is great. Okay,
Our
Max is
Telegram group now has over 1,000 people in the Telegram group.
That's right. And of course, the thing that's really good about building up these communities is the anti fragility of these communities. If we're going to be orange pilled together and it is a communal event, then of course, you don't want to rely just on Twitter or just on YouTube or just on Facebook or just on Telegram or anything like that. You want to be able to, you know, be anti-fragile to the deplatforming forces, because there are a lot of deplatforming forces and they're going to get stronger and stronger. I'm actually getting kind of worried about it because I see, to me, it looks like Trump is going to win, and I can't see at all how the Democrats plan on winning. Yes, I believe the Democrats will win the popular vote because they always get New York and California, and there are a lot of Californians and New Yorkers who hate Trump so viciously that they will turn out in droves. But unfortunately for them, and they'll make it seem like it was illegitimate, but the United States is a republic that operates by an electoral college vote. That's how you win the presidency. You have to win the electoral college vote. The popular vote doesn't matter all that much to the actual whether or not you get the White House. So I think he's going to win it. Like, just from my observation on my family, and remember, I was kicked off Facebook for about 4 years, and I'm just back on. The last time I was on it was like November of 2016, and I'm just back on now. So it's like jumping from the last election to this election. And the weird thing is I noticed that the Republican side of my family, back then, they hated Hillary so much. They were lukewarm on Trump. He was unusual, right? He was an unusual presidential candidate. And you could see that reflected in how they talked online. Like, anything they posted was just anti-Hillary. There was nothing like pro-Trump. But now they're like really, really, really pro-Trump. And
Mm.
that's happened especially in the past year. And I noticed that my Democratic side of the family and friends, and I would say the like 60%, maybe 70% of those I follow on Facebook are Democratic. And they never post anything political. They only post photos of their kids, photos of their vacations, photos of they're redoing their home and things like that. So that I saw that, like, I've just been observing it, not passing any judgment or anything, just observing. And then I was alarmed to see just in the past week through my Twitter stream that, oh my God, look at the most shared things on Facebook. It's Breitbart, it's Bongino, it's all these right wing Fox News sorts and things like that. And I was like, hey, like, I've noticed this on my Facebook, is like all my Republican family and friends share a lot of political stories.
Mm.
And the Democrats don't. They share stories about themselves. They share photos about themselves and their family and their kids. So maybe, but I don't notice any of those Republican on Facebook on Twitter. So the Democrats kind of use Twitter as a sharing news thing, and Facebook as a sharing photos of my new home thing.
Mm.
So there was the sense that I was seeing on Twitter when people were saying, "Oh my God, this is shocking. Facebook is disinformation. It's spreading disinformation." When in fact, what you're seeing is just different communities using social media in different ways, different platforms in different ways.
Right. Well, so what you're saying there is we're heading into the election, and the social media platforms are getting more aggressive in deplatforming people, right? So that we've seen that, and that's interesting. And then the other point you're making there is that the Democrats or the left wing politicians in America have put themselves in a really interesting position, because they've thrown everything they have at this, and it's the venom and the hatred is at an incredibly toxic level. So the question is, okay, what if Trump wins? They don't seem to have left themselves any position whatsoever. There's no reconciliation. There's going to be no acceptance of this whatsoever. The all of the political machinations that we've seen for the past 4 years on the Democratic side, which some would observe perhaps as being a distraction from focusing on an election, it would seem that maybe they're going to double down or triple down on that side of the equation. And then so where does that go? And to use go back to our analogy of the 1970s, we know that in the early 1970s, the radical left wing in America, the Weather Underground or the SLA, the Symbionese Liberation Army, became quite violent. And we is this what we're going to see?
Well, we're already seeing it, Max, but it's a different sort of thing because back then in the late 60s and early 70s, what you saw were a lot of young boomers they were just coming of age at that time. They were 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22 at that time. And what they were doing is they were resisting the state. It was them against the state, the imperial state. Remember, they were against the Vietnam War and they were against all the horrors that it showed about ourselves. Now it's like, the state is untouchable. The intelligence community, the FBI, CIA, NSA at this point compared to then are totally adored, embraced, and loved, like cherished so deeply. MSNBC, half of their lineup of people on their news every single night are CIA, FBI, NSA. They credit them as being that, and the reason why they credit them publicly like that is like to say, see, we get insiders. We're totally insiders. We're signaling to you that we are insiders and we are powerful. We have CIA on here every night. You don't, little chumps out there on YouTube. So what they're doing is, it's the people on the ground. It's like, they keep on dividing themselves up into new groups like Antifa and Boogaboo or whatever those things are called, and Proud Boys, and they're killing each other. And with such certainty of their righteousness, like they believe, as every killer in history does, that they are doing this for the good of everybody. We're doing this for the Germans. We're doing this for the American people. Like they always think that it's for the good of everybody when they're slaughtering people, that they somehow are uniquely righteous, uniquely endowed with the ability to determine, to be the judge, jury, and executioner, to just decide. I mean, we are an abused population. We do have a lot of all of these police, all of these laws, all these regulations that you violate every single day. The average American commits 4 felonies a day, they say, because there's so many different, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of books of laws that they entrap you essentially. So we are abused and we're acting like our abuser.
Well, yeah, it is so that the left wing media in America is dominated by state representatives from
Yeah.
intelligence agencies and what Eisenhower called the military industrial complex. I guess one of the interesting facets of what's going on now, and I guess what you would call what's happening in America now, a civil war. I think the closest analogy to what's happening now would be America's Civil War back in the 19th century. We're entering a new civil war. And if you contrast, let's say, World War II, the Vietnam War, and the Civil War of 2020, of course, in the Second World War, news was delivered to people through, you could call it newsreels. Newsreels were kind of reporting what was going on, and you heard about it, days or weeks later. In the Vietnam War, we had television reporting from the front lines. And this was changed the shape of that war in a big way. And it really gave agency to the protest movement and the anti-war movement that was able to see the body bags on TV and see reporting from Morley Safer and others who were actually on the front line and saying, look, this person, this murder is happening right now, this human rights abuse, this war crime, etc. In the 2020 American Civil War going on now, it's social media. And social media has energized groups in ways that are, unpredictable in many ways. And I don't think the history has been, hasn't been written yet about how social media impacts a civil war. Like we don't know exactly. We will in 6 months. We'll start, post election. We're going to start to get a taste of how did social media impact America's second civil war that took place during the 2020 presidential election. At the moment, we're at the periphery. We're just entering into that arena now. And I mean, I could speculate, and it's interesting to speculate how it will impact the outcome, but we won't know really definitively now for another 6 months. We won't get a sense of it.
And a huge there's a huge difference between 68 in the early 70s and the Vietnam War and the anti-war movement in the United States, and a big difference. So at that time you had Morley Safer was the breaking story, right? That's when it all changed. Is that for years all of the media that were there printed whatever the generals had said, and that was, of course, the U.S. had won World War II. We were the good guys. We were always good. We only act on good, morals. We're always looking to help the world out. We're never harming anybody. So they printed that. And then Morley Safer with his camera was, up in a helicopter, and they were allowed up in the helicopter into these scenes. And because the government trusted that they were just going to report what the government said about what the situation was on the ground. And Morley Safer saw these women and children executed, and old people crying and running at him, crying, "Why did you burn down my house?" And he showed those scenes and said, it perhaps isn't as going as well. And this is like 67, maybe 68. Maybe it's not as going as well as we keep on being told. This seems like a weird scene. It doesn't seem like what we're always told. And what happened? LBJ. He called. I think it was Morley Safer was at CBS maybe, and of course CBS was Sigourney Weaver's father ran it, and he had been with the CIA. So there was a whole crossover thing there, and LBJ, there's recordings of the call. He thought, like, is Morley Safer, like, is he working for the Kremlin? And they wanted him investigated to find out, make sure he wasn't receiving money from the Kremlin. And then when all the protests were happening and they were getting bigger and bigger, and they really stressed LBJ out, and he ordered the FBI to investigate to see if these protesters were being financed by the Kremlin. So it's always the Kremlin. It's like they don't even come up with new ideas. Like it's we've never been able to look at ourselves. We never ever see ourselves. We can't. We refuse to look at it. It always has to be this mysterious Kremlin.
Right. The messages of the Cold War, were handy to pull off the shelf and use to deflect the reality of what was going on, as Morley Safer of CBS News, and also reporters from the New York Times at that time was doing great investigative journalism into the Vietnam War. Also, the point was made during this Ken Burns Vietnam documentary that we saw a couple of weeks ago. It's 10-part series, very good, and that the Vietnam War actually allowed freelance reporters to show up, and they could get a reporting license or the pass or whatever they needed there on the spot. And you just had a lot of people showing up, freelance reporters and photojournalists, and just had a lot of people who were not being monitored at all by the state. They were just out there in the DMZ or near the DMZ or in the field and on the battlefield and taking shots. And those shots, some of those shots were going to be censored. The famous shot of the little girl naked on the street who had just been hit by napalm. That shot was, I believe it was the AP. I think it was a photographer from the AP.
Yep.
And it was going to be censored. But an old veteran at the office who had been a photojournalist for years, he said, no, this must be printed. And it was an iconic image that contributed enormously toward ending the Vietnam War. But, we don't have those old salts in positions of power anymore who can override the powers that be and say, no, my instincts as a journalist of 30 or 40 years tell me this must be printed. They don't have decisions being made by journalists doing the journalism anymore. Pretty much all journalism in America, left, right, all journalism does go through a very heavy censoring and filtering machine, whether it's an algorithm on a social media site, whether it's the Pentagon that owns the left-wing media in America, whether it's a huge corporate interest on the right-wing media, right? There is very little. There's only a few journalists like Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, us, I think we're in kind of that category, who you can say are doing, journalism. And journalism is, it's the fourth branch of government. It's part of the checks and balances. Jefferson called it possibly the most important part of the government. Then it's the basis of free speech. But there's very little of it going on.
Just one moment. I'm going to turn off my Wi-Fi and make sure it's just connected to the broadband. So don't be scared. Don't be alarmed. There. There.
How's that?
There. I just like I know I'm used to our normal editor for Kaiser Report gets very alarmed if there's a noise off camera or anything, that the audience will be alarmed and they'll be scared, and it's going to be you got to explain everything to them. So, but he's from old school news, and yeah, if you're in the BBC studio and hello, welcome to BBC News Night, they hear a noise, they're like, what was that noise? We heard Jeremy Paxman tell us what that noise is. What was it behind you? And it's like, it's just some audio engineer dropped his bong.
Yeah, audio engineers are notorious bong smokers, and they're always dropping them and causing incredible audio problems, which is ironic, isn't it?
Somebody's talking about booping. I don't know what that is, but yeah, of course the Intercept does like more journalism. I mean, I kind of consider us, I would put us in a journalist thing. I kind of like, we observe the news and the situation around us and the markets and monetary policy. We just observe and report. It's not like we report our opinion and what we think might be happening, because nothing is ever really the truth. The truth has been, people have been trying to figure out what is the truth for thousands of years. The major philosophers of our age have tried to figure out the nature of truth, and all we've come to is like that notion of juxtaposing headlines and stories and trying to put together a collage that gives you a glimpse of the truth.
Well,
Because
that's journalism. I mean, we have basically opinion that's newsy.
yeah,
Where if you watch cable TV, it's news that's basically portrayed as opinion, right? So the MSNBC or Fox News are expressing their opinions as news, and so that's where things get very gray, and people start to confuse journalism with opinion, and there's very little straight journalism anymore. And so, because that would be too difficult to manage and to manipulate, that was the problem in the Vietnam War. People were just getting the raw footage of people getting slaughtered by these soldiers in Vietnam, and so it had a huge impact. That now these days, people don't get anything that's not completely filtered and processed in terms of what they are calling journalism and news. It's like an extraordinarily processed, algorithmically tainted Velveeta cheese, and then everyone gets very upset what they're getting upset over is not even cheese. It's a facsimile of cheese.
yes, and I kind of look at Fox and MSNBC is, I mean, it's straight up propaganda, right? That's classic propaganda. That's, in a way, at least it's very transparent. It's not, you couldn't mistake it for real, right? It's like WWE for anybody outside it.
I mean, in a news program, you would hear news, but for some reason, and I think this is particularly true on the left or the MSNBC side of the equation, they literally feel as though they're on a crusade to
Yeah.
defeat evil, and they've portrayed the president as evil. And some in the left-wing politics, like Nancy Pelosi, has expressed her hatred of the Republicans as being a mortal threat to the country. So she's gone well beyond her mandate as a politician. She's now decided that she's a crusader.
But Max, because that's profitable. It was very profitable in the Middle Ages to go on crusades, and Fox News led the way here. Fox News did it first. They talked about they were unhinged about Hillary. Yes, I believe Hillary would have been a horrible president as well, and I did not like her in any way. Like, I really, really, really did not like her, especially in 2016. I think she was a better candidate in 2008, but in 2016 she was just so horrible, like so entitled, that I couldn't stand it. But they were unhinged about her as well, like all that Benghazi stuff, and it was just unhinged. But it was profitable, and they're the number one cable news channel. And so obviously the people who own, the shareholders who own MSNBC, they want some money. They don't want like boring news that's like in this environment of a population wanting gladiator fights. Like, what sort of emperor gets ahead in ancient Rome, like telling the people, no, 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 this is unnecessary violence. We can't have people killing each other like this for your entertainment and amusement. Let's just stay rational.
Right. I mean, okay, go back to Morley Safer at CBS News. He was on CBS News, and there were only 3 news networks: CBS, ABC, NBC. There were very few channels even to watch, and you got it from their top journalist on your nightly news.
Yep.
Now we got Matt Taibbi, who is a Morley Safer level quality journalist, and he's on not Patreon, but he's on a Substack.
Substack.
Where
We
you
subscribe.
right, you can subscribe to Matt Taibbi, and it's like public. You can. But does he get carriage over the mainstream media?
No, he's
Absolutely
banned
not.
now.
He's banned from
He's
mainstream media.
practically banned. He doesn't even get invited onto Democracy Now, which used to be kind of like what you're talking about. It was old fashioned traditional news, but now they've bought into that whole Democratic establishment thing. And again, they rely on corporate donation. So I don't know who's donating to them and where that might
How
come.
about Aaron Mate? He's even more in the style of a Walter Cronkite newsman. He's just like, here are the facts, and he gets a guest on and say, you say this, these facts say this. What do you say about that? Right? And he's deplatformed and banned from appearing on any of these stations.
Well, everybody you mentioned again, Glenn Greenwald, Matt Taibbi, Aaron Mate, who funds them? Who do they get? The mainstream Democrats call them what? They're Kremlin funded. They're Russian agents. So the same thing. It's like it hasn't changed. It was no different for all of these times. For decades. This is our classic go-to. And I don't know why. Like, it would just seem like I think just like they don't even spend any money on new narratives. And I wonder what that's about, because they do have Hollywood in their pocket. They didn't spend any money on a great narrative for Joe Biden during his the DNC, event. Like, what was this about? And, another thing I wanted to point out, that we just watched this World War II series, and it was a British series. Well, everybody had British accents, so I was assuming it was British made. And so therefore it shows a lot of the big battles of World War II. And the thing that was amazing, we've talked about some of them, is that like they just generals who refused to believe the grunts on the ground, who said like, there's an invasion force coming in here into the Ardennes. That's not possible. Like the Germans would never do that. The Nazis would never do that. Well, they came in through there. You saw that. But then in the last one, then we're talking about, the Buchenwald, when they liberated Buchenwald, is that the Red Army, the Soviets, had actually a year earlier started to liberate some of these concentration camps. And they were, of course, the first one they saw, they were just mortified, horrified, shocked at what they had seen, and gave photos to an AP journalist, an Associated Press journalist in Moscow, showed him the stuff. And this guy from Moscow, AP journalist, filed his report with the AP about the concentration camps. And AP refused to run it. They said it was Kremlin propaganda. And for a whole year, so they knew the genuine photographic proof and videos of what actually was going on in
right, because it's very difficult to overcome your biases. Everyone has a bias, and it's hard to fight your bias. And this is true in investing. It's true in reading the news. It's true in being a social person in a community or a family. You have inculcated, hard-coded biases. It could be gender biases, intellectual biases, cultural biases. So journalism, in many ways, is the art and the science and the professional pursuit of neutralizing one's own biases. That's the key to being a journalist. To the best of your abilities. And it's not perfect.
Yeah.
Those who are considered great journalists, in retrospect, you could see their work was even and informative, even though it would have been easier for that particular human being to let their biases seep into their reporting. But now we have a situation where your bias is the news. Sean Hannity's bias is the leading story tonight on Fox News. All facts are meaningless compared to Sean Hannity's bias. Rachel Maddow's bias, that's the leading story today, tomorrow, and the next day. What's the word for that? It's called propaganda. Lead with the bias because you want to lead with the emotional way to manipulate your audience first and then slip in the supporting details later, colored by that bias. Real journalism is you lead with the facts and then you leave the audience alone to interpret those facts. That is in very short supply, and the people that are doing it are been deplatformed.
Well, that brings me back to the Rachel Maddows of the world in particular, because, one thing that side of the equation does versus Fox is you don't really see Fox going around trying to get people deplatformed, right? That never happened, especially at their, peak when they were all powerful during the whole Bush administration, the second Bush administration. And they didn't go around trying to deplatform everybody. But what you see with the Rachel Maddows and CNN is that they do campaign against journalists. And the New York Times, they've run piece after piece trying to get various bloggers deplatformed or alternative media. They just ran a piece yesterday trying to get Glenn Greenwald, basically attacking him and The Intercept. And it's just like, that's the huge, massive, massive difference between now and the 60s and 70s. Is like they're like the media, the mainstream media is totally like there's no space at all there for something that goes against the government. You could have a morally safe or a Sid, the guy who's uncovered My Lai massacre. There was room for these people back then, but you would never have a Glenn Greenwald or a Matt Taibbi now allowed to be on MSNBC. Cenk Uygur from Young Turks, he had to leave MSNBC because they wouldn't allow him to talk about these corporations and this sort of political stuff.
Yeah, so that's this that as we head into this election, this becomes a bigger and bigger factor because the results, it seems as though we can say with some certainty, will be contested, and the states have to ratify these results, and that can take up to, I believe, something like 2 weeks. So that we might not have final results for 2 weeks, and during that 2 weeks, we could have a lot of problems politically and at the same time, we're still undergoing a massive financial economic crisis. So, this is and in that blackness, that blackout of actual news, counter narratives are forming. And remember, like the journalism in some ways are like the white blood cells that attack the bad narratives. It's easy for a bad narrative to travel. Bad news travels fast, a lot faster than good news. And in that environment, people who wish ill on the society are happy to spread bad narratives. And in the absence of proper journalism, that can spread like wildfire. And now people are going to be acting based on really terrible information and news that's being propagandized to them. And then some of the times the results are irreparable and irreversible.
Yes.
You go down a rabbit hole that you can't ever get out of. You mentioned World War II, obviously, in Germany and things like that. And okay, that's probably the most extreme example of a whole country, a civilized country, turned into rabid, fanatical, satanical, evil, agents of death. Okay,
How that happened was through propaganda, and you saw that quite clearly in that series that we just watched on Netflix. And it showed that when Hitler laid it out in like 38 or 39 in that speech where he starts off saying like he's going to eradicate the Jews, but what he said was that he starts it off talking about the Bolsheviks, and nobody took him seriously because like the population of Germany, the Jewish people were part of society and nobody saw them as the other until a year later. It took about a year or 18 months of Goebbels basically got rid of all other radio stations except for one. You could only listen to one radio station. It was him. Over day in, day out, hour after hour. He was like attacking the Jews. And then finally,
Radio was new.
yeah,
And the government would give the radios away to people. And by
yes.
the way, there's only one thing you can listen to. That's the state propaganda, and they have this agenda.
Well, so I mean that's a good point. Is like if you're a news source, say it's Fox or say it's MSNBC, and you tune in and you find that every time when you turn it off, like when you're ready to go to bed or start dinner, like you feel like angry and hateful towards somebody all the time. Like maybe you're being propagandized. Like maybe if you're not feeling liberated and positive and like or just like neutral, like okay, that was the news. Okay, Biden held an event there. Okay, Trump held an event there. But if you come away like all like from the news, like you know, then maybe you're being pushed a narrative that is not healthy for
Of
you.
course, they don't give away radios anymore today for free, but they do give you free social media access. It's free to sign up to Facebook. It's free to sign up to Twitter. So can we make an analogy there that it's free as long as the people who run those organizations can use them to propagandize?
Well, let's end there because, you know, social media, again, it is a way to communicate and it is an amazing opportunity to form groups and discuss these things. But there could be a day where it does get difficult. And that's why we have formed a few different, you know, we have the Twitter account, we have the Telegram account, we have a Minds account, we have Facebook. So there are ways to communicate and reach out and have a conversation. And our Telegram group is just really amazing because, you know, so there's 1,100, 1,200 people in there. And it's from like, there's like 200 different countries, 150 countries in there. There's like it's a huge quantity of nations represented in there. And that's really about the Orange Pill. That's you know, that's a genuine it's a community beyond nation state. Like nation state is so passe.
We're beyond the nation state. This is the United Nations of Orange Pill, all represented in the Orange Pill podcast, which on Telegram, and it's growing quite rapidly. And the podcast, Orange Pill Podcast, it's only been on for 5 weeks. It's already really the go-to podcast for almost everybody in not only the Bitcoin space, but in the emerging technology and in the desperately starved journalist space. People that don't are starving to hear some semblance of truth.
It's Renaissance 2.0. This week on Orange Pill, we will be talking to Dr. Adam Back. That is going to be super exciting. We're also going to delve a bit deeper into the stuff from Venus. Next week, especially, we'll be talking to a guy who kind of saw that life, you know, there's life forms on Venus, they believe. And here's a good story, Max. Here's a headline I'll leave everybody with. You'll be able to spot Uranus.
Oh, great.
Without a telescope this week.
Oh, that's great. Technology is always generating wonders. And to be able to spot Uranus without a telescope is something. What about an endoscope? Which you swallow the television camera in a pill. It travels through your alimentary canal. And then as it's exiting through the anus, you'd get a great shot of your anus in 4D. And it would be, what about that chocolate company that makes chocolate impressions of your anus? Have you seen that?
No.
It's like a chocolate kiss, but it's in the shape of your anus.
No.
And people give those as gifts. I think that might be some European country that you see that, or maybe Sweden.
Anyway, this is you know, for to be such an advanced aged woman and still laugh at Uranus jokes.
I think it's more like the sphincter that they do the impression for the chocolate. It's more like that sphincter impression. I guess it's unique, like your fingerprint. I suppose everyone's sphincter of their anus is going to be kept in an FBI database, and that's the only way they'll be able to distinguish one drone from the other.
All right. Well, you know, this is really cool, the software, and I could see, you know, watch this.
Yeah, most people at the Apple event turned Tim Cook off, and they're watching this instead. It's much more interesting than that.
Yeah.
That silly old guy.
Oh, is he doing another Apple event?
Every year. I think this is their annual.
I can't take it anymore. I've been using Apple since 1980 I don't know. Oh, 86. I can't remember how old I am. I can't. Was I alive in the 80s? Yes. Okay. So maybe like maybe 90. I can't remember. When did I get an Apple? Anyway, it's like all these incompatibility issues. I have 3 MacBook Pros here, and like only one of them works with the printer. The other two fail all the
Thank
time.
God we're compatible.
It's like it's nonstop. Okay. Well, now I'm going to have to get up. See, for those joining late, I'm going to learn how to use the Stream Deck. And from the Stream Deck, it has
Looks cool.
these 15 buttons, and I'll be able to operate everything from here.
When
Like
I saw it, I thought it was first you could like get a hot dog, hamburger, cream pie, like you order food on it. I'm surprised it's
you
just
could
something.
probably do that because you could program it to do anything on your computer. So you could
Right.
press it like order from Uber Eats, and it would do that, and it would press. You program it to do.
When I was a
specific
kid,
functions.
we didn't even have remote control for the TV. You had to get up out of your chair and switch the channel from channel 4 to channel 3.
Well, I'm about to do that right now then. Watch this. This is how we used to, like, for all you
Well,
young people who watch us
yeah.
and listen to this Orange Pill podcast and are microdosing
5
now.
feet of snow in the living room. Had to get through all that snow to get to the TV.
I'm
And
going to show you.
the antennas were sticking up.
Yes, we had
wire
antennas. We had to
You
bend
had
them to make sure to
like,
get
oh,
the
let's get
reception.
a better signal. Oh, I can't watch Star Trek. I need to bend the antenna.
Yep. And so this is how I'm going to reenact for you exactly how
This
it
is
used to happen.
exciting.
This is
This
how
is
it
a
used to have
reenactment.
to. But there was a big knob on the TV that you had to turn off.
That
But,
sounds
so this
rude.
Is,
We're not in Britain though, so it's okay.
So I'm going to show you how we used to do this. Okay.
Watch out. This is exciting.
This is how I used to
This is
have to
like
do it.
fishing with John.
Oh.
Oh man, he did it. Congrats.